For years, Vanessa believed her wedding day would be the day her life finally made sense. The day every prayer she whispered in private would rise and stand before her in white. The day patience would stop feeling heavy and start feeling holy. The day love would stop being a test and become a home. The day she would step out of uncertainty and into peace. She believed the man waiting for her at the altar was the answer. She believed the woman smiling proudly in the front row was her covering. She believed the people closest to her were standing with her in truth. But betrayal is never more dangerous than when it comes wearing familiar faces. It does not always enter through enemies. Sometimes it comes through family. Sometimes it kneels in church. Sometimes it smiles in photographs. Sometimes it waits until you are dressed like a bride before it tears your world apart. And less than 30 minutes after saying, "I do," Vanessa would walk toward a quiet hallway, hear a voice she knew, turn one corner, and discover that the two people she trusted most had already destroyed the future she thought she was stepping into. That morning, the church looked like a promise. Sunlight streamed through the tall stained glass windows in long ribbons of gold, red, and blue, scattering over polished wooden floors and white floral arrangements like heaven itself had decided to decorate the room. Soft music floated through the sanctuary. The choir stood ready in cream robes, their postures straight, their voices waiting. Cameras flashed, guests smiled. Perfume, polished shoes, flowers, soft fabrics, whispered compliments. Everything about the morning said beauty, celebration, and blessing. It was the kind of day people remember in detail. The kind of day old women describe for years. The kind of morning mothers cry over, cousins photograph endlessly, and church members call favored. And Vanessa Cole believed with all her heart that this was the day God had finally answered her. She stood at the back of the church in her white gown, bouquet in hand, fingers trembling just enough to reveal the weight of the moment. She looked radiant, but not in a loud way. Her beauty came wrapped in softness. Hope sat gently across her face. She wore the expression of a woman who had waited with discipline and was finally being rewarded. She had done things the right way. She had not rushed love. She had not compromised her values just to keep a man close. She had not confused desire with destiny. She had honored her boundaries, honored her faith, and honored the future she wanted. She loved Adrian Wells sincerely. She believed in marriage deeply. She believed holiness still mattered. She believed patience would one day feel worth it. And now, as the church doors opened and every head turned toward her, Vanessa felt like she was walking straight into the life heaven had prepared for her. At the altar stood Adrian, tall, handsome, well-dressed, calm. The kind of man people trusted too quickly because he knew how to look trustworthy. His suit was tailored sharply. His smile was warm, measured, polished. His posture carried that easy charm people often mistake for character. To the guests, he looked like the ideal groom, grateful, blessed, composed, and ready to cherish the woman walking toward him. But some men learn how to wear goodness without ever becoming good. They study the face of integrity. They copy the language of sincerity. They practice tenderness the way actors practice lines. And behind Adrian's handsome smile lived secrets no honest man should ever carry into a church. Still, Vanessa could not see that. Not yet. In the front row sat Lorraine Cole, Vanessa's mother. Elegant, as always, Lorraine wore class the way some women wear perfume. Subtle, expensive, impossible to miss. Her dress was refined, her jewelry tasteful, her posture regal. Guests greeted her with admiration, some with respect, some with envy. In the church community, Lorraine was a woman whose name carried weight. A successful CEO, a polished public figure, a generous donor, no, a mother people complimented for raising such a graceful daughter. She looked like dignity itself. But there are people who do not wear dignity because they possess it. They wear it because they know how powerful appearance can be. And on that morning, Lorraine wore hers flawlessly. Only one person in that church looked unable to fully relax. Deborah Lane. Vanessa's closest friend sat a few rows back, beautiful in her dress, but tense in a way no one else seemed to notice. Her smile never settled naturally. Her eyes moved too often toward Adrian. Her body looked present, but her spirit looked watchful. Deborah had never trusted Adrian completely. Not because of one obvious scandal, not because she had proof, not because she wanted to destroy Vanessa's happiness. It was worse than that. It was the little things. The slight delay before Adrian smiled when someone challenged him. The way he could sound sincere without feeling sincere. The way he said the right words at the right moments, but never seemed anchored in anything deeper than image. The way he attended church when Vanessa invited him, but never moved like conviction lived in him. Deborah believed character reveals itself in quiet places, and Adrian, in quiet places, always felt slightly wrong. When Vanessa reached the altar, Pastor Samuel Reed opened his Bible and looked at the couple with the steady eyes of a man who had seen joy and ruin walk through the same church doors wearing nearly identical smiles. "Marriage," he said, voice calm but heavy, "is not sustained by beauty, money, chemistry, or applause. Marriage survives on truth. And where truth is missing, a peace cannot stay." For one brief second, the room went still. Vanessa held Adrian's hand a little tighter. Adrian swallowed. Lorraine lowered her eyes. Deborah looked up sharply. Then the ceremony continued. The choir sang. The vows were spoken. Rings were exchanged. Guests dabbed tears from their faces. Cameras flashed with excitement. And when Pastor Samuel finally pronounced them husband and wife, applause burst across the sanctuary like thunder. Vanessa smiled through tears. Real tears. Tears of relief. Tears of gratitude. Tears from a woman who believed she had waited long enough and was finally stepping into safety. She thought she was entering peace. She thought she was beginning a life covered in love, family, and faith. She thought she was stepping into a future blessed by God and protected by those closest to her. She had no idea something dark was already moving beneath the beauty. Deborah noticed a glance. Just one. Quick, almost invisible. Easy to miss, but not innocent. Adrian's eyes shifted toward Lorraine for a second too long. It was not the glance of a respectful son-in-law. It was not casual. It was not harmless. It was not clean. Lorraine noticed it too. Her face did not change, but something flickered inside her expression. Something private, practiced, hidden too well for most people to ever catch. Nobody else saw it. Nobody else felt the room tilt. But the storm had already entered. Because before that day would end, the vows would mean nothing. The music would turn into silence. The celebration would rot into shock. And the woman glowing in white would learn that betrayal had not come from a stranger. It had come from the two people standing closest to her. 30 minutes later, the celebration was in full bloom. The reception hall shimmered with golden light, polished glassware, soft music, flowers, laughter, and the busy movement of people congratulating themselves for witnessing what they believed was a beautiful union. Waiters moved through the crowd, holding trays of sparkling drinks. Family members formed warm circles around tables. Churchwomen smiled knowingly and called Vanessa blessed. Men shook Adrian's hand and welcomed him into the family. Everything still looked beautiful. And for a few fragile minutes, Vanessa tried to hold on to that beauty. She smiled for photographs. She accepted hugs. She thanked guests. She laughed politely. She listened to the same words again and again. Like, you look stunning. You two are perfect together. Your mother must be so proud. That last sentence touched something strange in her chest. Not pain, not even fear. Just a tiny discomfort she could not explain. Across the room, Lorraine moved from table to table with elegant control, receiving compliments as if the entire wedding were a reflection of her own greatness. Her smile was precise. Her voice was warm. Her posture was perfect. She looked like a woman fully enjoying her daughter's moment. Adrian looked just as polished. He laughed exactly when laughter was expected. He thanked the men who praised him. He touched Vanessa's waist when cameras turned their direction. He kissed her cheek when guests smiled at them. To everyone watching, he looked like a man grateful to have married the right woman. But Deborah saw what others missed. The restlessness in his eyes. The forced calm in his face. The way his attention drifted when no one was looking directly at him. The way his peace felt acted rather than lived. She stepped beside Vanessa after another round of photographs. "You okay?" Deborah asked softly. Vanessa gave a faint smile. "I should be asking you that. You've been watching Adrian like he owes you money." Deborah didn't smile back. "I'm serious." Vanessa's expression softened. "Deborah, something is off," Deborah said quietly. "Even now." Vanessa looked away. "Please, not today." Deborah studied her friend for a second, then let the tension ease just enough to keep the moment from turning sour. "I hope I'm wrong." Vanessa nodded, but the discomfort stayed. It was small, barely there, of the kind of instinct people ignore when they want happiness more than truth. Then Aunt Celeste called Vanessa over for another set of photos. A cousin raised a toast. Applause followed. Laughter returned. And still, in the middle of all that joy, Vanessa suddenly felt overwhelmed. Not unhappy, not suspicious, just crowded, tired, pulled in too many directions at once. "I'll be right back," she told Deborah. "I just need a minute." She gathered the skirt of her gown and slipped out of the reception hall into the corridor beyond. The shift was immediate. The music softened behind the doors. The air was cooler. The silence felt almost merciful. Her heels clicked gently against the polished floor as she walked toward the washroom. For the first time since the ceremony, she could hear herself breathe. Inside, and she stood before the mirror and touched the edge of her veil. "You're married," she whispered softly, half smiling, half disbelieving. For one small moment, she looked like peace. Then she heard it. A voice. Low. Familiar. "Adrian." Vanessa turned slightly toward the door. At first, she thought nothing of it. He was probably talking to one of her cousins, maybe one of the ushers. But then she heard another voice. A woman's voice. Soft. Close. Intimate. Lorraine. Vanessa frowned. There was a pause. Then a quiet laugh. Then a whisper too low to make out, but much too personal to dismiss. The air around her changed. Her hand dropped from her veil. Her shoulders stiffened. Something cold moved through her body before her mind could even name the fear. Or she stepped out of the washroom and followed the sound down the side corridor near the private lounge. Each step felt heavier than the last. Her heart began to pound so hard it nearly drowned out the voices. Then she turned the corner, and the world stopped. There, half hidden from the hall, stood Adrian and Lorraine. Too close, far too close. Lorraine's hand rested on Adrian's chest, like it belonged there. Adrian leaned toward her, not away, not startled, not resisting. And before Vanessa could fully process what she was seeing, Lorraine lifted her face and kissed him. Not by accident, not by confusion, not by a passing mistake. A real kiss. A chosen kiss. A betrayal so shameless it almost looked unreal. Vanessa froze in place. Her bouquet remained trapped in one hand. Her breath caught halfway in her chest, and the hallway seemed to go silent inside the silence. Adrian pulled back first. He saw her, and all the color drained from his face. Lorraine turned next, and in that one horrifying instant, the marriage Vanessa had just entered was already over. No one moved. The music from the reception hall still floated somewhere in the distance, but now it sounded wrong, like it belonged to another world, another life, another woman's story. Vanessa stood there in her wedding gown, staring at the two people who had just shattered her trust with one shameless act. Adrian took a step forward. "Vanessa, wait." But the charm was gone now. The polish was gone. The confidence was gone. He no longer sounded like a groom. He sounded like a man standing in the ruins of his own lies. Lorraine recovered faster. She always did. Her hand slipped from Adrian's chest, and then within a single breath, her face rearranged itself into the expression she had worn her entire life whenever control threatened to leave her hands. Calm, offended, superior. "This is not what it looks like," she said. That was the moment something changed inside Vanessa, because betrayal was one wound. But standing in front of proof while being insulted with a lie, that was another kind of violence entirely. Vanessa let out one short, hollow laugh, not from amusement, from disbelief. "Not what it looks like," she whispered. "Then tell me what I just saw." Adrian opened his mouth, but nothing true came out. Lorraine stepped in again, as if she still had the right to manage the story. "You're emotional," she said. "This is your wedding day. You're overwhelmed." Vanessa turned and looked at her mother as if seeing her for the first time, and not as the elegant CEO, not as the respected churchwoman, not as the polished mother people admired, but as something colder, something smaller, something dangerous. And suddenly memory came rushing back, not one by one, but all at once. Deborah's warnings came first. The sharp look she used to give Adrian every time he sounded too sweet in public and too careless in private. The time she pulled Vanessa aside after Bible study and said, "A man who resents your boundaries before marriage will not honor you after it." Vanessa had defended him then. "He's trying," she had said. "He's just struggling." Now those words sounded embarrassingly young in her own memory. Then came Adrian's complaints. The times he sulked when Vanessa stayed firm in her values. The little jokes he made about her being too strict, too holy, too disciplined. Even the way he sometimes acted wounded because she would not give him what he believed he deserved. Back then, Vanessa had called it frustration. Now she had a different word for it: entitlement. Then came Lorraine. The comments she had made that Vanessa pushed aside because they felt too ugly to believe. A woman must understand a man's weakness if she wants to keep him. The private conversations she had with Adrian under the excuse of helping him find work. The way she defended him, even when he was clearly wrong. The way certain conversations seemed to stop when Vanessa entered the room. The strange little pauses. The subtle discomfort she ignored because she wanted peace more than suspicion. Vanessa's stomach turned. "Oh my God," she whispered. Not because she understood everything yet, but because enough pieces had just snapped into place to make denial impossible. This had not started in that hallway. This had roots. Adrian dragged a trembling hand over his face. "Vanessa, please. Let me explain." But Lorraine shot him a warning look. She did not want explanation. She wanted control. Vanessa saw that too. Tears filled her eyes, but her voice became steadier. How long? Neither of them answered. That silence said more than confession ever could. Vanessa nodded slowly, as if her soul was finally catching up to a truth her heart had been too innocent to accept. So, Deborah was right, she said quietly. All this time, she was right. Lorraine's expression hardened. Do not bring outsiders into family matters. That sentence hit Vanessa harder than the kiss, because that was Lorraine's method, always. Hide rot behind the language of family. Call silence maturity. Call control dignity. Call obedience respect. Call truth betrayal. Vanessa took one slow step back. And suddenly, every suspicious moment she had brushed aside returned with merciless clarity. Adrian defending Lorraine too passionately. Lorraine speaking about Adrian like she knew him too deeply. Those strange pauses when Vanessa entered a room, the little looks, the discomfort she kept burying because she wanted joy more than truth. Now she saw it clearly. What she had just witnessed was not the beginning of the betrayal. It was only the first time they had been careless enough to let her catch it. Long before the kiss in that hallway, long before the vows and the applause and the white dress, the line had already been crossed. It had not begun with touch, though it had begun with complaint. Back then, Vanessa was preparing for marriage with a sincere heart. She believed love required patience. She believed commitment should be clean, disciplined, and blessed. To her, boundaries were not punishment. They were protection, a sign of self-respect, a sign of obedience, a sign that some things were too sacred to hand over casually. She wanted to enter marriage with peace in her conscience and dignity in her spirit. Adrian pretended to respect that at first. He smiled when she spoke about faith. He nodded when she said some things should wait until marriage. He praised her for being different. But admiration in a weak man can quickly turn into resentment. Over time, what he first called virtue began to feel like inconvenience. Then inconvenience became irritation, and then irritation hardened into bitterness. He sighed when Vanessa refused to bend. He made little jokes that were not really jokes. He became distant when guilt might do what persuasion could not. He sometimes behaved as though her boundaries were proof she did not love him enough. One evening after church, standing beside her car under the fading orange sky, Vanessa looked at him and said softly, "Love that rushes past respect is not love. If you want me, then want me the right way." Adrian forced a smile. "The right way," he repeated. "Everything with you has to be a lesson." Vanessa looked hurt, but she did not retreat. "Everything with me has to remain honest," she said. "That should not offend you." That should have been the moment Adrian looked inward. Instead, it became the moment he looked elsewhere. And the worst part was not that he went looking for comfort. It was where he found it. Lorraine. At first, it happened quietly. Adrian would linger after visiting Vanessa. Lorraine would ask how he was doing, and he would answer with the sigh of a man eager to be pitied. He spoke about stress, then about frustration, then about feeling misunderstood. Then, bit by bit, he began saying things he never should have said to another woman, especially not to Vanessa's mother. A decent mother would have shut that down immediately. A decent woman would have said, "Respect my daughter." A decent mother would have corrected him. A decent woman would have told him to grow up. But Lorraine was not interested in decency. She listened, not with shock, not with maternal concern, with interest. One afternoon in her office, leaning back in her chair with the stillness of a woman watching a door open, Lorraine said, "Vanessa has always been idealistic. She sees life in black and white, rules, right, wrong, discipline. She means well, but sometimes she doesn't understand how the real world works. Adrian looked up at once. Exactly. That one word was enough. From that moment on, Lorraine became the wrong kind of comfort. She softened her tone when he complained. She defended his weakness instead of correcting it. She suggested Vanessa was too inexperienced to understand a man's needs. She framed selfishness as something natural and boundaries as something excessive. Every time Lorraine excused him, Adrian felt more justified. What Vanessa thought was harmless guidance had already become emotional betrayal. Lorraine was studying him now. His insecurity, his ambition, his hunger to feel important, his embarrassment over not being as stable as Vanessa. She learned what bruised his ego. She learned what made him feel seen. She learned how badly he wanted power, position, and the feeling of being chosen. And Adrian liked being near someone who made his weakness feel reasonable. That was his real problem. Not just desire, not just impatience, vanity. He liked being understood without being challenged. He liked being pitied without being corrected. He liked standing near power that fed his ego instead of exposing his lack of discipline. One evening, after Vanessa had left Lorraine's house, Adrian stayed behind under the excuse of discussing employment opportunities. Lorraine offered him a drink and asked softly, "Tell me the truth. Are you happy?" Adrian hesitated, and then he said the words that opened the first real door to destruction. "I love Vanessa," he said slowly, "but sometimes I feel like she doesn't understand me at all." Lorraine lowered her eyes, hiding the satisfaction on her face. "No," she said gently. "Maybe she doesn't." Sin rarely enters with a scream. Most of the time, it enters with a whisper that sounds like understanding. Vanessa never heard those conversations. She never saw the line being crossed the first time. She believed her mother was helping Adrian become stable. She believed Lorraine was trying to support the man she was preparing to marry. She believed the people around her were helping build her future. She had no idea they were building something behind her back. By the time wedding plans were fully underway, Adrian had become a man carrying two hungers at once. One was obvious. He wanted position, money, respect, a title, a life that would stop people from looking at him like a man still trying to prove himself. The second hunger was uglier. He wanted shortcuts, and Lorraine Cole knew exactly how to feed both. Vanessa, in her sincerity, thought she was helping the man she loved. She had built stability for herself through discipline and wisdom. She handled her money carefully. She had savings, structure, and a future she could see clearly. Adrian, on the other hand, was always almost becoming something. Always speaking about plans, always talking about potential, always convinced that one opportunity would finally change everything. Vanessa never mocked him for that. She encouraged him. One evening over dinner after church, she reached across the table and held his hand. "Why don't you speak to my mother?" she asked. "She's hiring again. She might be able to place you somewhere solid." Adrian looked up quickly. "You really think she would?" Vanessa smiled softly. "You're about to become family. Why wouldn't she?" That is the tragedy of good-hearted people. They often assume others are moved by the same love they themselves would give freely. Vanessa still believed family meant protection. She still believed influence could be used to bless. She still believed Lorraine's power would build, not trap. At first, the arrangement looked harmless. Lorraine invited Adrian to her office. She reviewed his resume. She asked sharp questions about his goals. She spoke to him about presentation, leadership, business culture, and long-term planning. Adrian left those meetings feeling energized. For the first time in months, he could see a real path opening in front of him. But Lorraine never helped him all at once. That was part of her design. She gave him just enough to keep him dependent. A contact here, a compliment there, a delay, a suggestion, a reminder that he had promised but still needed her guidance. Every conversation carried the same hidden message. You are close, but not without me. And Adrian, for all his pride, walked straight into that trap. Marcus noticed the shift before Vanessa did. Marcus was one of those friends who mistook cynicism for wisdom. Sitting in a sports bar one night with a drink in his hand and too much arrogance in his mouth, he listened as Adrian described Lorraine's growing role in his life. Lorraine says she might open a senior operations position for me, Adrian said, trying to sound casual. I'll bet better salary than anything I've had. Marcus smirked. That woman likes you? Adrian frowned. She's my future mother-in-law. Marcus laughed. And I'm telling you, powerful women don't keep pulling men close for nothing. Stop acting blind. Adrian looked uncomfortable, but he did not deny it. Marcus leaned forward. Listen to me. You're trying so hard to play loyal, spiritual, patient for Vanessa. For what? That girl makes you beg for everything. Meanwhile, the mother is opening doors. Use your brain. Adrian stared into his glass. That was the problem. He already was. Back at home, Deborah had begun noticing the pattern too. She saw how often Adrian's name came up in Lorraine's mouth. She saw how Adrian suddenly spoke about Lorraine with unusual admiration. She saw how Vanessa brushed every concern aside with the blind trust of someone who still believed everyone around her wanted her well. One afternoon, while helping Vanessa sort wedding invitations, Deborah finally said it plainly. Your mother is too involved with him. Vanessa looked up. Involved how? In every way she doesn't need to be, Deborah said. Private calls, job talks, advice, meetings, personal interest. I'm telling you, something about this is not clean. Vanessa sighed and placed an envelope down. Deborah, please, my mother is helping him, that's all. Deborah kept her eyes on her. I hope that's all, she said, because Adrian is the kind of man who can be bought with attention. And your mother is the kind of woman who enjoys being needed too much. That irritated Vanessa, not because it sounded cruel, because somewhere deep down, it unsettled her. Still, she pushed it away. She had a wedding to plan, a future to protect, a dream she did not want contaminated by suspicion. So she chose trust. Again. Meanwhile, Lorraine tightened the strings. She invited Adrian into strategy sessions he had no real reason to attend. She asked his opinion on matters beyond his experience. She complimented the way he carried himself. She made him feel chosen, seen, elevated. And Adrian, already ashamed that Vanessa was financially stronger and more grounded than he was, clung to every interaction that restored his pride. He told himself he was doing this for their future. He told himself Lorraine was simply mentoring him. He told himself he was still in control. But when a person starts defending what feeds the ego instead of what protects integrity, danger is already close. Vanessa thought she was handing Adrian a ladder. She did not know she was placing him directly into her mother's hands. And when the first real opportunity arrived, it came wrapped in prestige. Lorraine called Adrian one Tuesday afternoon and told him there was an upcoming business trip to Accra for a regional strategy meeting. 2 days, important people, high-level conversations, serious rooms, serious exposure. She said it casually, as if it were simply an opportunity to learn. But Adrian heard something else. Access. Validation. Entry into a world he desperately wanted to belong to. You should come, Lorraine told him smoothly. You need exposure. If you want to grow, you have to be around serious people. Adrian sat straighter. You really think I'm ready for that? Lorraine paused just long enough to make the answer feel valuable. I think you could be, she said, with the right guidance. That was how she worked. She never gave him full certainty. She gave him just enough hope to keep him reaching. When Vanessa heard about the trip, she smiled at first. She was standing in her apartment with a folder of wedding receipts when Adrian told her. For one brief moment, she felt relieved. Maybe this meant things were finally stabilizing. Maybe her mother really was helping. Maybe Adrian would return more focused, more grounded, more ready to become the husband she believed he could be. That's wonderful, Vanessa said. See? I told you she wanted to support you. Adrian hugged her, but something in the hug felt off. Not enough to accuse, not enough to understand, but enough to notice. Are you okay? Vanessa asked. Of course, Adrian replied too quickly. Why wouldn't I be? Vanessa studied him. I don't know, she said quietly. You just seem different lately. He laughed, but the sound sat awkwardly between them. Maybe I'm just tired. Maybe. But tiredness did not explain the way he avoided her eyes. It did not explain why Deborah frowned the moment she heard about the trip. They were in the church fellowship hall when Vanessa mentioned it, still trying to see the best in everybody. Deborah's face changed immediately. Why does your mother need Adrian on a private business trip? Vanessa sighed. It's not private, it's work. Deborah crossed her arms. Your mother is a CEO. Adrian doesn't even work there yet. Why him? Because she's helping him, Vanessa said, sharper now, and Deborah lowered her voice. Or because she likes having him close. That sentence landed heavily. Vanessa looked away. You're making this ugly for no reason. No, Deborah said quietly. I'm saying it feels ugly because something about it already is. But Vanessa was too invested in peace to examine the discomfort. So once again, she chose trust. Lorraine, meanwhile, made sure the trip felt special. She arranged Adrian's hotel. She sent him the itinerary herself. She told him what to wear, who to pay attention to, and how to carry himself. Her messages looked professional on the surface. Underneath them was something warmer. Too warm, too personal, too familiar. By the time they boarded the flight, the balance between them had already shifted. In Accra, Lorraine moved through hotels and conference spaces like a queen in her own territory. Executives greeted her with respect. Assistants moved quickly for her. Staff adjusted their tone when addressing her. Adrian watched all of it with admiration that slowly became dependence. Beside Lorraine, he did not feel like a struggling man anymore. He felt chosen. That was the first seduction, not touch, power. Lorraine knew exactly what he lacked at home. Vanessa loved him, yes. But she also challenged him. She expected maturity. She expected honesty. She expected growth. Lorraine expected nothing noble from him. She simply fed what was weakest. On the second evening, after the final meeting ended, Lorraine invited Adrian to stay behind for dinner in a private hotel lounge. The city lights glowed through tall glass windows. Oh, soft jazz moved through the room. The table was beautifully set, too beautifully for something that was supposed to be harmless. Adrian hesitated when he saw it. This doesn't look like a business meeting, he said. Lorraine smiled calmly. Not everything important needs a boardroom. He should have left then. Some part of him knew that. Sitting there in that dim room, with polished silverware, luxury, and temptation dressed like opportunity, he knew this was no longer mentorship. It was invitation. Lorraine leaned back and studied him. "You know what your problem is, Adrian." He gave a dry smile. "I'm sure you're about to tell me." "You wait for other people to make you feel like a man," she said. "Vanessa makes you prove yourself. The world makes you beg. But real power comes when you stop apologizing for what you want." Those words slid into him like poison covered in praise, because they said exactly what his ego had been craving. Adrian looked down. Vanessa wouldn't understand any of this. Lorraine's eyes sharpened. "No," she said softly. She wouldn't. Silence settled between them. Heavy, intentional, dangerous. Then Lorraine reached across the table and placed her hand over his. Not by accident, not in comfort, as a choice. Adrian did not pull away. That was the moment the affair truly began. Not with confusion, not with helplessness, with decision. A selfish man, a manipulative woman. Two people crossing a sacred line while the one person who trusted them both sat at home finalizing wedding details. And after that, everything became easier. Secret messages, private calls, excuses, meetings that lasted too long, conversations that moved too softly, familiarity turning into boldness. Once conscience is silenced, betrayal no longer needs darkness to grow. It learns how to live in plain sight. By the time they returned from the trip, Adrian and Lorraine were no longer standing near temptation. They were inside it. And Vanessa, still choosing flowers, approving seating charts, thanking God for her future, had no idea that her marriage had already been stained before she ever walked down the aisle. Now, standing in that hallway with the truth laid bare before her, she felt all of it hit her at once. The lies, the signs, the hidden history, the humiliation. But what shocked her most was not even the kiss. It was the audacity. The audacity to stand at an altar before God and family pretending innocence while carrying this filth behind the scenes. Adrian stepped forward again. "Vanessa, please. Just listen to me." Lorraine moved faster. "You need to lower your voice," she said sharply. "People are right outside." That sentence changed something inside Vanessa. Because even now, Lorraine's first concern was not repentance. It was image, not the wound, the witness. Vanessa stared at her mother. "Lower my voice," she whispered. "You were kissing my husband." Adrian flinched at the word husband. Lorraine's jaw tightened. "This is not the place." "No," Vanessa said, and now her voice rose, stronger, steadier. "You do not get to decide the place." Adrian glanced nervously toward the hall entrance. "Please, let's go somewhere private." Private, and that word almost made Vanessa laugh. Private was where liars rearranged truth. Private was where guilty people washed shame into softer language. Private was where families buried damage so the innocent could suffer quietly while everyone else saved face. Vanessa took another step back. For the first time in her life, she looked at her mother and felt no instinct to obey. "You knew exactly what you were doing," she said to Lorraine. Then she turned to Adrian. "And you stood at that altar, held my hands, repeated vows before God, and came here to do this?" "Vanessa, it was a mistake," Adrian said quickly. Her expression changed. "A mistake," she said. "A mistake is forgetting a ring, missing a turn, saying the wrong thing. This was a choice." Lorraine folded her arms, gathering authority around herself like a shield. You are emotional," she said. "If you cause a scene now, you will humiliate yourself more than anyone else." There it was, the old weapon, shame, control, silence dressed like dignity. Vanessa stared at her. and years of swallowed hurt started rising at once. Every time Lorraine had corrected her tone instead of hearing her pain. Every time she had used elegance like a leash. Every time she had taught Vanessa to protect appearances instead of honoring truth. Then footsteps approached. Deborah. She had come looking for Vanessa after too much time had passed. The moment she saw Vanessa's face, she knew something was terribly wrong. Vanessa? Then her eyes moved to Adrian, to Lorraine, to the guilty silence between them. Her expression changed instantly. What happened? Vanessa looked at her friend, and this time the pain cracked through. You were right, she whispered. Deborah's face hardened. She looked at Adrian first. I knew you were weak. Then she looked at Lorraine, and the disappointment in her voice was colder than anger. But you, she said quietly. Her own mother? Lorraine snapped. Mind your place. Deborah stepped closer and stood beside Vanessa like a wall. My place, she said calmly, is beside my friend. From inside the reception hall, music and laughter still drifted through the doors. Somewhere, glasses clinked. Someone was probably making another toast. Guests were still celebrating a marriage that had already been poisoned. Adrienne was panicking now. Vanessa, don't do this here. Please, we can explain. But Vanessa had crossed a line inside herself too. She was no longer waiting for truth. She was carrying it. And suddenly the thought of walking back into the hall and pretending felt more unbearable than public collapse. Pretending for guests, pretending for church people, pretending for family, pretending for photographs. She looked toward the reception hall doors. Her face was pale, her eyes were wet. But her posture changed. Silence would not protect her. Silence would only protect them. No, she said. Lorraine's eyes narrowed. Vanessa. But Vanessa was already moving. Not running, not screaming, not stumbling. She turned and walked toward the reception hall with the slow, devastating calm of a woman carrying a truth sharp enough to split a room open. Deborah stayed beside her. Adrian followed in panic. Lorraine followed too, trying to hold together a story that was already collapsing. The doors opened. The hall was still glowing, but the music was still playing. People were still smiling. And Vanessa stepped back inside, still dressed in white, but no longer as a bride entering celebration. Now she looked like truth walking into the room. She moved toward the center of the hall with the kind of silence that makes people uneasy before a single word is spoken. One by one, conversations began to thin out. Faces turned, smiles faded. Even those who could not yet see the pain in her face could feel that something had changed. Adrian stepped in behind her, then Lorraine, then Deborah. And suddenly joy began to retreat from the room. One bridesmaid lowered her glass. A cousin stopped mid-sentence. A waiter slowed down. A church mother straightened in her chair. Someone near the speakers signaled for the music to stop. And then there was silence. The kind of silence that feels like glass before it shatters. Vanessa stood in the center of her own reception, still in white, still trembling, still trying to hold herself together in front of everyone who had just celebrated her. Her heart was breaking in public, but when she spoke, her voice did not collapse. It cut. I just walked out into the corridor, she said, and found my husband kissing my mother. The room broke without sound at first. Faces froze, eyes widened, mouths opened. A glass slipped from someone's hand and hit a table with a small, sharp knock. Then the whispers began. What? No. Not Lorraine. Did she say her mother? On the wedding day? This can't be true. Shock spread through the room like fire through dry grass. Adrian stepped forward quickly, pale and sweating. It's not what she's making it sound like. Deborah let out a bitter laugh. Then tell them, she said. Tell them what it sounds like. Adrian opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Lorraine lifted her chin, trying to recover her dignity. This is a private family matter, she said coldly. It should not be turned into a public spectacle. That only made the room recoil further, because innocent people defend truth. Guilty people defend privacy. Pastor Samuel stepped forward then, not loudly, not theatrically, but with the calm authority of a man who understood that once truth enters a room, it cannot be sent back outside. Enough, he said. The hall quieted immediately. His eyes moved from Vanessa to Adrian to Lorraine. Whatever this is, he said, it is not confusion. And whatever was done in secret has now wounded this entire day. Vanessa closed her eyes for a second and steadied herself. Her humiliation was public now. Her pain was visible. The wedding she had dreamed of for years was collapsing in front of everyone she knew. But inside that pain, something else had begun to rise. Clarity. Because once truth enters, buried things start coming with it. Deborah was the first to stop protecting anyone's image. I told her, she said, turning toward the room. I told her something wasn't right. I watched him. I watched her. I saw how he defended Lorraine when no one asked him to. I saw how involved she was in his life. This did not start today. That sentence changed the room, because if it had not started today, then this was no accident. No sudden moment, no isolated weakness. This had a history. Aunt Celeste slowly rose from her seat, face pale with shock and something else. Guilt. The guilt of someone remembering something she should have spoken about sooner. There is something I need to say, she said. The room turned to her. Months earlier, she admitted, she had once seen Adrian leaving Lorraine's office late in the evening. Too late for ordinary business. Both of them had looked unsettled, too careful, too flustered. She had convinced herself not to assume the worst. Now she no longer had that excuse. And with that confession, the shape of the scandal changed completely. This was not one reckless moment after the ceremony. This had been growing for a long time. Vanessa felt the truth hit her in waves. The private talks, the business meetings, the suspicious glances, Adrian's mood shifts, Lorraine's strange loyalty toward him, Deborah's warnings. The discomfort Vanessa kept overriding because hope is often the last thing a good-hearted person lets go of. Now every ignored sign came back sharpened. Every memory had teeth. Adrian looked around the room like a man drowning in his own exposure. The applause from earlier had been replaced by disgust, pity, disbelief. Men who had congratulated him minutes earlier now looked at him like they wished they had never shaken his hand. Vanessa turned toward him. So how long? She asked again. Her voice was lower now, more dangerous, because pain sometimes becomes calm when it realizes rage is no longer necessary. The truth had already done the damage. Adrian looked down. Lorraine said nothing. That silence answered everything. One woman near the back covered her mouth and whispered, "Lord, have mercy." A bridesmaid sat down abruptly, as if her knees had gone weak. An older church mother began quietly crying. Vanessa stood in the center of the wreckage of her own wedding and finally understood something she had not wanted to believe before. The kiss in the hallway had not broken the marriage. It had only exposed that there was never a real marriage there to begin with. Because vows spoken over deception are not covenant. They are performance. If this story moved something in your heart, subscribe to the channel. And drop a comment telling me which city or country you're watching from. I'd truly love to know where you're listening from. Because vows spoken over deception are not covenant. They are performance. And in that reception hall, with flowers still fresh on the tables and congratulations still hanging in the air, Vanessa realized she had not just been betrayed. She had been staged. Every smile, every photograph, every blessing, every handshake, every prayer spoken over that union. All of it had happened above a foundation already cracked by lies. Adrian tried one last time to control the moment. He lifted both hands slightly, the way weak men do when they know they are guilty, but still hope tone can achieve what truth never will. "Vanessa, please," he said, voice shaking now. "You're hurting, and I understand that. But this is not the whole story." The whole story. That phrase moved through Vanessa like acid. Because people who betray you always talk about the whole story after the truth comes out. As if details can reduce filth, or as if context can sanitize corruption, as if explanation can somehow make treachery less ugly. Vanessa looked at him, and for a second, she did not even recognize the man she had married less than an hour earlier. The handsome suit was still there. The polished shoes were still there. The carefully styled image was still there. But now she could see the weakness underneath everything. She could see a man who had mistaken access for worth. A man who had confused being desired with being valuable. A man who had stood before God with a lie in his mouth and a secret in his chest. And for the first time since the day she met him, Vanessa felt no urge to protect him from the truth of who he really was. "You don't get to say the whole story to me," she said quietly. "Miss, you had every chance to tell me the truth before you put a ring on my finger." The room stayed silent. No one wanted to move. No one wanted to breathe too loudly. No one wanted to become the person who broke the tension before the truth finished speaking. Lorraine finally stepped forward, her posture still regal, her expression still carefully measured, but the edges of her control were starting to show. "This has gone far enough," she said. "We are not going to stand here and destroy ourselves in public." That sentence revealed everything that was rotten in her. Not remorse, not apology, not maternal grief, not even shame, only image. Even now, after being caught in the most unspeakable betrayal a mother could commit against her own daughter, Lorraine's greatest fear was still public damage. She did not mind being guilty. She minded being seen. Vanessa turned to her slowly, and when she spoke, her voice no longer trembled. "Destroy ourselves?" she said. "You already did that?" The words landed like a slap across the room. Lorraine's face tightened. "Watch your tone." There it was again, that old weapon. Not concern for the wound, concern for control. Vanessa laughed once, sharp, wounded, disbelieving. "My tone?" she said. "You stood in the same church where I said my vows and kissed my husband behind a hallway wall. And you're talking to me about tone?" A murmur rippled through the guests. Some looked away, unable to bear the ugliness. Others stared in open horror. A few were now remembering things they had noticed but dismissed. Small glances, strange nearness, odd familiarity. Moments that had not made sense at the time. Now those memories were rearranging themselves into truth. Pastor Samuel's face remained grave. He did not interrupt Vanessa. He understood something important in moments like this. Sometimes what people call a scene is simply truth refusing to die quietly. Adrian tried again, desperate now. It was complicated. Deborah's laugh this time was cold enough to cut glass. "No," she said. "Sin is not complicated. Cowardice is not complicated. Lust is not complicated. What's complicated is the amount of lying it takes to keep pretending you're decent." Adrian's jaw tightened, but he did not answer her. Because guilt makes cowards of people who spent too long mistaking charm for strength. Vanessa stood in the middle of the room and felt the weight of every eye on her. But beneath that weight, something steadier was forming. Not comfort, not peace, but decision. She was not going to spend 1 second longer standing there like a bride, protecting the dignity of the very people who had humiliated her. She was not going to keep her voice low so liars could keep their faces clean. She was not going to swallow this moment and spend years being told to heal quietly for the comfort of those who caused the wound. She lifted her chin. "This marriage is over," she said. There was an audible shift in the room, not loud, but real. Because when a woman says those words at a reception, still dressed in white, with flowers and cake and guests all around her, it does not sound like emotion. It sounds like finality. Adrian stepped toward her in panic. "Vanessa, don't say that." She moved back from him instantly. "Do not touch me." That hurt him more publicly than anything else she had said. Not because it wounded his soul, but because it stripped him of access in front of witnesses. Lorraine tried once more to regain authority. "You are not in your right mind." Vanessa turned to her. "No," she said. "For the first time in my life, I am." That sentence silenced even the whispers, because everybody there heard the deeper truth beneath it. Vanessa had spent years being trained to soften, manage, excuse, and absorb. Years being taught that dignity meant composure even when you were bleeding. Years being shown, mainly by Lorraine, that a graceful woman keeps ugly things hidden. But now, standing in the wreckage of her wedding, Vanessa understood what Lorraine had never taught her. There is no dignity in protecting evil. There is only delay. The reception dissolved after that. Not instantly, not cleanly, but visibly. And one table at a time, the celebration began collapsing under the weight of what had been revealed. Guests gathered their bags. Church members huddled in small circles, whispering furiously. Some came to Vanessa with tears and soft hands and sincere concern. Others avoided eye contact, as if her pain had become too raw to stand near. A few drifted toward Lorraine, not because they supported her, but because scandal draws people the way blood draws flies. The cake remained untouched for a long while. The music never restarted. The photographer quietly lowered his camera and stood aside. The decorations still glowed beautifully, but now they looked ridiculous, like makeup on a corpse. Deborah stayed beside Vanessa the entire time. That mattered, because betrayal feels different when even one honest person refuses to leave your side. At one point, Vanessa's knees nearly weakened beneath her, not from theatrics, not from performance, but from the sheer collision of shock and grief. Deborah caught her by the arm before she could sway too far. "I've got you," she whispered. Those words nearly broke Vanessa more than anything else that night. Not because they were dramatic, because they were true. She had not heard many true words that day. Pastor Samuel approached with the solemn weight of a man who knew no scripture could erase what had happened. But perhaps truth could still guard what remained of Vanessa's dignity. "Child," he said gently, "do you want someone to take you home?" Vanessa nodded, but before she could answer, Adrian appeared again. "I should go with her." Deborah turned so fast it startled even him. "No," she said. "I'm her husband." The word husband hung in the air like something rotten. Vanessa looked at him with a coldness that surprised them both. "No," she said. "You are the man I found kissing my mother." He went still. Because sometimes, The most devastating thing you can do to a liar is stop using the titles they abused. Pastor Samuel nodded once, as if sealing the matter. Deborah will take her. Lorraine said nothing then. She had become quieter now, not humbled, not transformed, but calculating. Vanessa knew that look. It was the face Lorraine wore when she had lost control in public and was already preparing her private strategy. That was another thing Vanessa saw clearly now. Lorraine never sat with truth. She studied damage. As Deborah led Vanessa away from the hall, people moved aside for her. No one cheered. No one knew what to say. Even sympathy felt too small for what had happened. She walked through the room in the same gown she had worn down the aisle less than an hour earlier. But she no longer looked like a woman leaving a wedding. She looked like a woman leaving a fire. Outside, the evening air struck her skin like something unreal. The world beyond the church had not changed. Cars still passed, streetlights still glowed. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. Ordinary life had continued, as if the earth had not just cracked open under her feet. That offended her. The normalcy of the world after personal disaster is one of pain's strangest cruelties. Deborah helped her into the car. For the first few minutes, neither of them spoke. Vanessa stared ahead, bouquet still in her lap, veil slightly shifted, makeup beginning to fail under tears she had been holding back too long. Then finally she whispered, "Tell me I'm not dreaming." Deborah gripped the steering wheel tighter. "You're not dreaming." Vanessa swallowed hard. "Tell me I didn't imagine it." "You didn't." Silence again. Then came the tears. Not the soft tears of a bride, not graceful tears, not the kind people dab away with handkerchiefs and call beautiful. These were body-breaking tears, the kind that come when shock starts turning into knowledge, the kind that hurt the face, the chest, the throat, the kind that leave no room for elegance. Vanessa cried for the marriage. She cried for the humiliation. She cried for the version of her mother that had just died in front of her. She cried for every warning sign she had pushed aside. She cried for the innocence that had dressed itself in white and walked toward a lie. Deborah did not interrupt her grief with empty wisdom. She did not say everything happens for a reason. She did not say be strong. She did not say at least you found out now. She just let Vanessa cry. Sometimes the holiest thing a person can do is refuse to shrink another person's pain into a lesson too early. When they finally reached Vanessa's apartment, the silence inside felt unbearable. Wedding gifts were already stacked in one corner. Flowers from well-wishers stood fresh in vases. A pair of shoes she had planned to wear on the honeymoon sat near the sofa. Every object in the room still believed in a future that had already died. Vanessa stood in the doorway and looked around like a stranger entering someone else's life. And then she said the sentence no bride should ever have to say on her wedding night. "I can't do this." Deborah gently took the bouquet from her hand and set it aside. "You don't have to do anything tonight except survive." That helped, because pain that large must first be survived before it can ever be understood. Deborah stayed with her. She helped Vanessa out of the dress, though even that simple act felt violent, unzipping the gown, lifting the fabric, freeing her from the clothing that now felt haunted. Vanessa stood in silence as if she had left her body. The mirror reflected a woman no longer bridal, no longer glowing, no longer certain of anything except that trust had just become dangerous. Later, wrapped in a plain robe and sitting on the edge of her bed, Vanessa finally said what had been moving through her head since the hallway. "It didn't start today." Deborah sat beside her. "No," she said. "It didn't." Vanessa wiped at her face. "How long have you really suspected?" Deborah took a breath. Not from the beginning, she admitted. At first, I just thought Adrian was weak. The kind of weak man who wants the image of a good woman without the discipline required to deserve her. But when your mother kept inserting herself into his life, it started feeling different. Too close, too personal, too comfortable. Vanessa looked down. I should have listened. Deborah turned toward her carefully. No, she said. You should have been protected. That line struck deeply, because it shifted the weight. Until that moment, Vanessa's mind had been trying to make herself responsible for her own betrayal. Why didn't I see it? Why didn't I question it harder? And why did I keep trusting? But Deborah's words pulled the truth back into place. Trust was not Vanessa's crime. Treacherous people were. That night, Vanessa barely slept. When she did close her eyes, the same image kept returning. Lorraine's hand on Adrian's chest. Lorraine lifting her face. Adrian leaning in. The kiss. The pause after. The shamelessness of it. The speed with which both of them tried to deny what had happened while it was still alive in the air. By morning, the story had already escaped the church walls. Scandal moves faster than truth because people carry it with excitement instead of grief. Phones began buzzing before sunrise. Relatives, church members, friends, people Vanessa had not spoken to in months. Women who had praised the wedding decor now asking if the rumors were true. Family members pretending concern while hunting for details. Cousins calling cousins, church mothers calling prayer partners. The entire story was spreading in fragments, with each mouth adding tone, judgment, shock, and speculation. Vanessa's phone lit up relentlessly. Are you okay? Please tell me it isn't true. I heard something terrible. People are saying unbelievable things. Call me when you can. You need to be careful what happens next. Careful. That word made Vanessa sick. Because careful often means silence, when people with status have sinned publicly. It means let us protect the family name. Let us manage appearances. Let us soften the truth. Let us ask the person bleeding to stay elegant so the guilty can recover in peace. Deborah muted the phone and turned it face down. But you do not owe anyone a composed version of your pain, she said. Vanessa stared at nothing for a moment. Then, in a voice stripped clean of performance, she said, I'm done protecting people who never protected me. That was the beginning of her clarity. Not healing yet, but clarity. And clarity is often the first mercy after betrayal. Around midday, Lorraine called. Vanessa watched the screen ring and ring and ring. She did not answer. Then Lorraine called again, and again. Finally, Deborah looked at Vanessa. Do you want me to answer? Vanessa hesitated, then nodded once. Deborah put the phone on speaker. Lorraine's voice entered the room, already sharpened by offense. Tell Vanessa this foolishness has gone far enough. Vanessa laughed once, bitterly. Foolishness. Even now, Lorraine was choosing language that reduced wickedness to inconvenience. Deborah said nothing. Lorraine continued. She needs to stop ignoring me and start thinking clearly. This family has already been embarrassed enough. Vanessa leaned forward. Embarrassed enough? Lorraine did not soften. Yes, what happened was unfortunate. But if you keep behaving emotionally, you will destroy more than you need to. The sheer cruelty of that sentence almost stole the air from the room. Unfortunate. As if she had spilled wine on a tablecloth. As if she had said something inappropriate at dinner. As if she had not kissed her daughter's husband on her daughter's wedding day. Vanessa's voice turned cold. You mean I'll destroy your image? Lorraine paused, and then she took the route she always took when control slipped. She disguised manipulation as wisdom. You are too emotional to make permanent decisions, she said. Let the dust settle. Adrian made mistakes. I made mistakes. But you do not end a marriage over one terrible moment. One terrible moment. Vanessa almost marveled at the audacity. It was not one moment, she said, and even if it were, it was enough. Lorraine's tone dropped lower. You are my daughter. You should be protecting this family. There it was, the foundation of Lorraine's entire moral universe. Not right and wrong, not truth and falsehood, not guilt and innocence, only loyalty to image. Vanessa answered with a calm so absolute it startled even her. No, she said. Family should have protected me. Then she ended the call, and that sentence stayed in the room long after the line went dead. Family should have protected me. It was the truth beneath everything. The truth beneath the wedding. The truth beneath the scandal. The truth beneath every whispered conversation and every request to keep things contained. Vanessa was not just betrayed by a man. She was betrayed by structure, by trust, by the very relationships designed to make her feel safest. That afternoon, she called a lawyer. The decision came with shaking hands, but not uncertainty. This was not an empty threat, not emotional language, not a tactic to force guilt out of guilty people. She was done. The woman who spoke to her on the phone was gentle, professional, efficient. She asked practical questions: marriage certificate, timing, property, public circumstances. Vanessa answered through the haze of exhaustion, but one thing inside her remained solid. She was not staying tied to a man who had defiled the very first hour of marriage. The moment she ended that call, she felt something strange. Not joy, not relief, but a thin line of air returning to her lungs. Decision often feels like oxygen after long confusion. Meanwhile, across town, Adrian was discovering that exposure had a cost he had never prepared for. At first, he tried to frame himself as misunderstood. He called Marcus. He called 2 cousins. He called one church friend who had once admired him. He tried to speak in the language of pressure, weakness, confusion, temptation, stress. But the problem with being exposed publicly is that people no longer have to rely on your version of events. Too many people had seen his face, and too many people had seen Vanessa's pain. Too many people now knew enough to stop granting him moral ambiguity. Marcus, of course, offered the wisdom of a fool. She'll cool down, he said. Women always say it's over when they're hurt. Give it time. Apologize. Stay low. Let the gossip move on. But Adrienne knew something Marcus did not. This was bigger than anger. Vanessa had looked at him like a stranger. And worse than that, she had looked at him like a liar who no longer deserved the privilege of explanation. He felt the loss of access before he felt the loss of love. That was his tragedy. Not just that he had betrayed, but that even now, beneath the shame, there was still selfishness. He hated the humiliation. He hated the public collapse. He hated being looked at as weak. He hated losing the future Vanessa represented, when what he did not yet fully hate was the man he had become. That would come later, when consequence had time to strip everything else away. In the days after the wedding, family lines began to split. Some people stood beside Vanessa immediately and completely. Deborah, of course. Aunt Celeste. A few cousins who were disgusted enough to stop pretending diplomacy was wisdom. Pastor Samuel, whose sorrow was real but whose discernment was sharper than anybody realized before that day. Others were less clean in their support. They said things like, "What happened was wrong, but your mother made a terrible mistake, but Adrian failed, yes, but..." This should never have happened, but that word, but, became the ugliest word in Vanessa's life for a while. Because it always arrived carrying somebody else's comfort. By the end of the sentence, the betrayal was always smaller, the family image was always bigger, and Vanessa was somehow expected to become the mature one in a situation created entirely by other people's corruption. One evening, a small family meeting was arranged at an aunt's house. Vanessa did not want to go. Deborah did not want her to go. But Aunt Celeste urged her gently. "Come," she said, "not to be convinced, to hear who people really are." That mattered, because betrayal doesn't only expose the guilty, it exposes the crowd around them. The living room was tense before anyone even sat down. Relatives avoided direct eye contact. Tea sat untouched on the table. The air carried that heavy politeness families wear when they know something ugly is in the room but still want to pretend they can discuss it respectfully. Lorraine was there, perfectly dressed, controlled, still elegant. If someone had not known what she had done, they might have mistaken her silence for dignity. Adrian was not present. That at least spared Vanessa one layer of nausea. For a while, people spoke in circles. We need wisdom. We need calm. We need to think long term. We should not let this become bigger than it already is. Vanessa sat very still, listening. Then one uncle finally said what several people had been circling around without courage. "What happened was terrible," he said. "But public divorce will only make this more painful for everyone." For everyone. The phrase hit Vanessa like a slap, as though the burden of communal discomfort now belonged equally to the innocent and the guilty. Another relative added, "A broken marriage is no small matter. Once things are set and filed, there is no taking them back." Vanessa looked at them and realized something sobering. Some people do not want justice. They want quiet. Because quiet lets them return to normal without having to choose a side strong enough to cost them anything. Lorraine finally spoke then, her tone measured like a woman trying to appear above emotion. "I have already admitted that mistakes were made." Vanessa looked at her in disbelief. Mistakes. Still that word. Not betrayal, not corruption, not desecration. Mistakes. Lorraine continued, "But I will not sit here and let one moment of weakness destroy this entire family." That was when Aunt Celeste stood up. And the room changed. She did not shout. She did not need to. "Enough," she said. Everyone went silent. She turned first toward the relatives who had been speaking in soft, cowardly circles. "Like this child," she said, pointing toward Vanessa, "was wronged by the very people who should have honored her the most. Stop asking her to carry shame that belongs elsewhere." No one interrupted. Then Aunt Celeste turned to Lorraine. And when she spoke again, her voice carried the force of something withheld too long. "You taught this family to worship image," she said. "That is why truth had to explode before anybody would face it." The room did not breathe, because everyone knew she was right. Lorraine's face tightened, but for once she had no superior reply ready. She had spent years building an image too polished to challenge. People admired her discipline, her success, her refinement. They mistook restraint for virtue. They mistook elegance for moral authority. Now, all at once, the structure was cracking. Aunt Celeste was not finished. "She is not divorcing a man over one bad night," she said. "She is walking away from rot that had already entered the house before she ever stepped into it." Vanessa's eyes filled, but this time not from humiliation, from being seen. Truly seen. There is a kind of healing that begins the first moment someone stops asking the wounded to explain why the wound hurts. After that gathering, the family dynamic changed permanently. Some relatives grew quieter around Lorraine. Some withdrew. Some stayed polite but no longer warm. Some continued defending her, but now did so from a place of fear rather than conviction. Image can survive rumors. It struggles to survive revelation. As for Adrian, his fall continued in slower, more private ways. People stopped calling him back. Professional opportunities dried up. Men who once shook his hand warmly no longer wanted their names tied to his. Even the vague promises Lorraine had used to keep him close had become meaningless now. Whatever career boost he thought he was gaining had turned to poison in his mouth. And then there was something else. His health. Vanessa had noticed that night at the reception, though she had not understood it then, that Adrian looked tired in a way that went deeper than panic. There was a drawn quality in his face, a weakness in the way he held himself. A brief moment when he pressed a hand to his side as though standing itself cost effort. In the chaos of betrayal, nobody paid much attention to it. But after the scandal, those signs worsened. He became more fatigued. He looked thinner. His energy seemed unstable. The charm that once sat so easily on his face was being worn down by something he could no longer hide. For a while, he ignored it. Weak people often ignore what threatens their performance. But the body eventually tells truths the mouth refuses to confess. When his condition worsened enough to frighten him, he went to see a doctor. Tests were done. Blood was taken. Questions were asked, some routine, some invasive, all of them now impossible to dodge with charisma. Then came the waiting. And waiting can feel like judgment when you already know your life has been built on concealment. When the results finally came, Adrian sat in a room that felt too small for consequence. The doctor spoke plainly. Adrian was HIV positive. The news hit him with a force that broke through every remaining layer of denial. Not because illness is a moral label. It is not. Not because sickness makes a person evil. It does not. But because in his case, the diagnosis arrived tangled with deception, recklessness, hidden behavior, and the terrifying realization that he had stood at an altar withholding truths that could have destroyed another person's life. For the first time, fear entered him in a way shame never had. Real fear, not the fear of being talked about, not the fear of looking weak, the fear of consequence no charm could soften. He thought of Vanessa, not nobly at first, not from compassion, from horror. Because now the full weight of what he had done expanded beyond betrayal into danger. He had not only lied, he had not only cheated, he had not only humiliated, he had gambled with someone else's body while pretending to offer her a future. And that realization broke something in him. When Lorraine heard the news, her composure cracked in a way very few people had ever seen. The woman who had always known how to command a room, redirect a narrative, and wrap sin in expensive language suddenly looked frightened. Not embarrassed, frightened. And that difference matters. Embarrassment worries about the crowd. Fear worries about truth. Quietly, secretly, Lorraine arranged to be tested as well. She told no one. Not the relatives still trying to defend her. Not the church women pretending the real tragedy was public scandal. Not the family members still saying things like, "We all make mistakes." She went alone. No designer clothing could hide the shaking in her hands. No posture could save her from waiting. No status could buy her a different result. When the answer came back positive, Lorraine stepped into a silence deeper than reputation. For the first time, consequence reached a place her image could not protect. And for all her years of teaching Vanessa how to look composed in public, Lorraine now learned something she had never respected enough to teach. Truth does not care how elegant you are. Some people spend their entire lives believing secrecy is protection. They think if no one knows, no real damage exists. They think lies buy time. They think image is stronger than consequence. They think silence is safety. But truth is patient, and when it finally rises, it does not knock politely. It tears through everything. Vanessa heard about Adrian's diagnosis days later through a private chain of information that moved more carefully than the wedding scandal had. Pastor Samuel called her first, not because he wanted to intrude, but because he believed certain truths should reach wounded people from sober hands instead of gossiping mouths. His voice was quiet when he spoke. "There is something you need to know." Vanessa sat very still while he explained. He did not add drama. He did not speculate. He did not preach. He simply told her that Adrian had received serious medical news and that, given the circumstances, she should speak to her doctor and take whatever precautions were necessary. When he finished, Vanessa did not cry. At least, not immediately. She sat in silence so long that Deborah, who was in the room with her, finally asked, "What is it?" Vanessa turned her face slowly. Her expression was not just pain now. It was astonishment at how much deeper betrayal had actually gone than even she realized. When she finally told Deborah, the room seemed to empty of air. Deborah covered her mouth. For a long moment, neither woman spoke. Because some truths do not explode. They sink, deep, heavy, cold. Vanessa's first response was not anger. It was nausea. Then came trembling. Then came the horrifying replay of every conversation about boundaries, every complaint Adrian had ever made about waiting, every moment he had acted as though her discipline was an inconvenience. Suddenly, those same boundaries, the ones he resented, mocked, and tried to pressure, looked like mercy, protection, rescue. If Vanessa had compromised herself to keep him happy, how much worse would the story have become? That thought broke her open in a new way, because she realized that one of the very things people had subtly criticized in her standards, her restraint, her insistence on waiting, had become the wall that helped save her from a deeper tragedy. She wept then, not just for what had happened, but for what almost did. Deborah held her and whispered the only true thing there was to say. "Your boundaries protected you." That sentence stayed with Vanessa. For days, for weeks, for months. Your boundaries protected you. People call disciplined women difficult. People mock restraint until restraint saves a life. People label standards as pride until standards expose hidden danger. Vanessa would never forget that. After the diagnosis, any remaining attempt by family members to frame the situation as one terrible lapse collapsed under the weight of reality. The story was no longer just about humiliation. It was about deception at a level too dangerous to excuse. Even the relatives who loved silence more than justice grew quieter now, because some things cannot be politely minimized once the truth deepens. Still, healing did not arrive all at once for Vanessa. Pain rarely leaves through the same door truth enters from. The days were uneven. Some mornings she woke up feeling almost clear, only to be ambushed by memory before lunch. Some evenings she sat by herself and felt rage move through her so fiercely she had to stand up and walk around the room just to keep from drowning in it. Some nights she revisited old conversations in her head, hearing new meanings in old words, realizing how many times deceit had stood in front of her, dressed as ordinary life. She grieved the marriage. She grieved the humiliation. She grieved her mother, not the real Lorraine. That woman had now been revealed. But the mother Vanessa thought she had. That is one of betrayal's cruelest layers. Sometimes you do not only lose what happened, you lose what you believed had always been there. And that absence has to be mourned too. The divorce process moved forward. Documents, meetings, statements, legal language turning heartbreak into procedure. It was exhausting, but strangely clean. Paperwork has no interest in performance. It only asks what is true, what is documented, what is ending. Vanessa found comfort in that. No soft manipulation, no guilt-laced speeches, no family pressure disguised as wisdom, just facts. She signed where she needed to sign. She answered what she needed to answer. Most, she refused every attempt by Adrian's side to frame the matter as mutual breakdown. There would be no shared blame here, no convenient rewriting, no dignified false narrative that suggested two people simply wanted different things. No. One person had entered the marriage in trust. Another had entered it in deceit. That distinction would remain clear. Adrian attempted to contact her more than once, sometimes through calls, sometimes through messages. Once through a long email full of language about regret, confusion, weakness, pain, shame, and wanting one chance to speak face to face. Vanessa did not answer. At first, she wondered if that made her hard. Then she understood something freeing. Closure does not always require conversation. Sometimes closure comes the moment you stop giving access to the person who built their comfort on your silence. Lorraine tried too, though differently. Her messages carried less apology and more emotional ownership. You are still my daughter. No matter what happened, blood is blood. You will understand one day that life is more complicated than you think. I never stopped loving you. That last line offended Vanessa more than open cruelty would have. Because love that betrays, manipulates, competes, lies, and endangers is not love in any form worth receiving. Eventually, Vanessa sent one message. Short, clear, final. I am not available for contact right now. Please do not come to my home. Please do not involve third parties to pressure me. I need distance, and I am choosing it. That was all. No rage, no long explanation, no attempt to wound. Clarity often sounds colder than anger, because it has already passed through pain and decided not to live there forever. Deborah remained constant through all of it. Some days she brought food and forced Vanessa to eat. Some days she brought laughter. Some days she sat in silence and let the room breathe without demanding that healing perform. One evening, they sat together on Vanessa's balcony, watching city lights flicker awake, one building at a time. The air was cool. The night felt still in a way pain sometimes needs. Deborah looked over and said, "Do you know what unsettles people now?" Vanessa gave a tired half smile. "What?" "You saw people clearly," Deborah said, "and you still refused to become cruel." Vanessa was quiet for a moment. "I wanted to," she admitted. "I know." Vanessa looked out over the city. There were moments I wanted God to let me hate them." Deborah's voice softened. "And?" Vanessa exhaled. "I don't think I hate them. I think I see them, and somehow that's worse." Deborah nodded slowly. That was true. Hatred can still keep you emotionally bound. Clear sight loosens the knot. At church, Pastor Samuel preached one Sunday about discernment, grief, and the danger of confusing appearance with character. He never said names. He did not need to. Everyone understood. Not everyone who stands near holy things is honest, he said. Not everyone who speaks the language of family, faith, and respect has been shaped by those things. And not every loss is punishment. Some losses are rescue. That sentence moved through Vanessa like light entering a locked room. Some losses are rescue. She repeated it later in the car, and then again at home. Then again weeks later when memory struck unexpectedly. Some losses a rescue, because yes, the truth had humiliated her. Yes, it had wounded her. Yes, it had stripped her life bare in public. But if that truth had not come when it did, what then? How long would the deception have continued? How much deeper would the damage have gone? How much more of herself would she have lost trying to honor vows built on rot? The answer was unbearable, which meant Pastor Samuel was right. This loss was also rescue. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, healing began. Not dramatic healing, not the kind that comes with one perfect conversation or one sermon or one sunrise. Real healing, the kind that arrives in decisions. Vanessa changed her routines. She stopped answering people whose concern was only curiosity wearing polite clothes. She reorganized her home. She gave away things she no longer wanted touching her life. She boxed up the wedding dress and did not open it again. She returned gifts where appropriate, donated what she could not bear to keep, and removed every object that felt like a monument to false beginnings. She also learned boundaries in a new form. Not romantic boundaries now, relational ones. She learned that forgiveness and access are not the same thing. That you can pray for people without welcoming them back into your life. That release does not require reunion. That kindness does not mean availability. That peace often requires distance from those who taught themselves to wound you and call it love. That lesson changed her deeply because before all this, Vanessa had believed being good meant staying reachable. Now she understood that wisdom sometimes sounds like no. Months later, if someone had seen Vanessa at a distance, they might have thought she looked like herself again. She worked. She attended church. She smiled more naturally. She laughed without forcing it. She carried herself with quiet steadiness. But she was not the same woman. Not because she had become bitter, because she had become discerning. There is a difference. Before, she trusted goodness until proven wrong. Now, she looked for truth before surrendering trust. Before, she assumed proximity meant loyalty. Now she understood that some of the most dangerous people stand closest. That change did not harden her. It clarified her. As for Lorraine and Adrian, their world continued narrowing. Not overnight, but steadily. The affair that once thrived on secrecy now had to breathe in consequence. The glamour was gone. The stolen closeness had become contaminated by exposure, fear, illness, and shame. Whatever thrill existed in hidden access could not survive the weight of public ruin forever. Vanessa did not keep track of them closely. That mattered too. Freedom often begins when the people who hurt you stop being the center of your emotional weather. She heard things occasionally, of course. That Lorraine had become more isolated. That some business relationships grew formal and distant. That Adrian looked older, thinner, quieter. That the two of them were no longer moving through the world with the confidence they once drew from secrecy. But Vanessa did not build her healing around their downfall. That chapter was no longer hers to carry. She had spent enough years mistaking endurance for peace. Enough years trying to earn love from people who valued control more than care. Enough years explaining away what should have warned her. Now she had something stronger than approval. She had clarity. She had boundaries. She had herself. And that was enough. So the story does not end with a bride standing beneath flowers and church lights. It ends with a woman standing in truth. A woman who walked through humiliation and still kept her mind. A woman who saw evil clearly and still refused to surrender her soul to it. A woman who stopped begging to be chosen by people unworthy of her trust. A woman who learned that dignity is not silence, peace is not pretending, and love without truth is just danger wearing perfume. Vanessa lost a marriage. She lost the mother she thought she knew. She lost the fantasy of a family built on safety. But she did not lose her future. If anything, she finally took it back. And the lesson buried inside her story is one too many people learn too late. Not everyone close to you is for you. Not every polished face hides a clean heart. Not every person who speaks the language of love, loyalty, family, and faith actually honors those things. Some people know exactly how to perform goodness while quietly destroying what they pretend to protect. That is why character matters more than charm. Integrity matters more than image. And truth, no matter how painful, is always better than a beautiful lie. There is another lesson too. Boundaries are not weakness. Vanessa was never wrong for wanting patience, discipline, and respect in her relationship. She was not difficult. She was not old-fashioned. She was not doing too much. She was protecting her peace. And sometimes the people who get angry at your boundaries are the very people those boundaries are meant to protect you from. Never lower your standards to keep someone who resents them. Adrian was weak. Lorraine was selfish. And Vanessa's pain began long before the wedding day. The kiss in the hallway was not the beginning. It was simply the moment the mask finally fell. And what hurts most in stories like this is not just betrayal. It is betrayal from the people who should have protected you most. A partner is supposed to bring safety. A parent is supposed to bring covering. When both become the source of pain, the wound cuts deeper than language can fully hold. But still, one last truth remains. Sometimes exposure is mercy. Because as brutal as the truth was, it saved Vanessa from a lifetime of deeper heartbreak. So now let me ask you, what do you think about this story? Did Vanessa do the right thing by walking away? Could you ever forgive a betrayal like that? Have you ever trusted someone completely, only to discover they were someone else behind closed doors? Have you ever ignored warning signs because hope felt easier than truth? Tell me honestly in the comments. And if this story stayed with you, subscribe to the channel and write the name of your city or your country below. I'd really love to see where in the world you're watching from.